Hey guys, welcome back to the Cult of Film. Wanted to start dipping into some of the movies that just are near and dear to my heart. There's movies that I enjoy, movies that I love and that I've forgotten about and rediscovered. And I think now I just want to delve into movies that I revisit over and over. Movies that have sort of just, at this point, are sort of in my DNA. And I'm pretty sure today's movie is either in my top five, maybe top three of all time. And that is 2001 A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. This is probably my favorite Kubrick film. And just having rewatched it probably for like the 18th time last night, I am just continually astounded at how good this movie looks considering it was made in 1968, or it came out in 1968, which means it was probably made in 67. This is pre-digital effects. This is pre-Industrial Light and Magic. This is pre-Amblin and all the cool stuff that Spielberg did, starting in the late 70s, going through the 80s. Again, remarkable how everything in this movie was built. The story of A Space Odyssey, and people claim that there really isn't a narrative here, and there totally is. Essentially, what this film is about is human evolution. It starts at the dawn of man, millions, maybe tens of millions of years ago, when humanity was just kind of, or life on Earth, were just basically primates. That we lived in sort of like uh, herds and so on. And it starts sort of like in a very sort of desolate area with these sort of ape-like creatures, more ape-like than human-like, just surviving, trying to evade large cats of prey and find enough to eat. That's really what life was. Millions of years ago, it was all about survival. And there's even a subtitle at the beginning of that part of the film, and it says "The Dawn of Man," and that goes on for maybe 20 to 30 minutes. And it's really interesting because there's no dialogue. It's just watching sort of nature uh, do its thing. Lots of landscapes. I'm not sure where that part of the movie was shot, but it's just these massive, desolate sort of quasi deserts and rock formations. And very impressive are the actors that are sort of in these ape-like suits. It's really incredible. Like, I think probably as a kid watching this film, I think I first saw it maybe at the age of 12. I don't know that it occurred to me that they were people in ape suits, and it would be later to be like, wow, that's really impressive. And we see this sort of life of these primate people, and then at some point, out of nowhere, a large black obelisk appears just right in the middle of sort of their den, their region, and it's humming this sort of cosmic aria of sorts. And of course, they're just enamored by it. They're intrigued by it, but they're afraid of it. And that sort of cosmic singing that seems to be coming from the obelisk reaches a crescendo, and then we're sort of given a different view. We see one of these apes standing on his hind legs and sort of asserting himself amongst the rest of the apes. And he starts, brandishing a bone from, they seem to be hunting tapir, Tapir, which are a type of mammal that I believe exists in South America, maybe parts of Africa. And he sort of asserts himself and sort of gains dominance over the pack there, and learns to use these bones as weapons. So basically, you have, in a way, sort of cruel discovery of a tool, of a weapon, and he starts smashing some of these existing bones. And then as that reaches a crescendo, we see a bone fly up into the air, and boom, it cuts to a space station in outer space. And we are shot to, presumably from 1968 standards, the year 2001, or what I would consider still the future, because we don't have, we're not known for having massive sort of colonies out in space. We do have space stations, but at this point in the film, humankind has pretty much conquered space, and we see a Pan Am flight. Pan Am, for those of you youngsters, and I don't remember Pan Am, I'm not that old, was an airline back in the day. I think ceased to exist maybe in the 80s. Um, and there's this space plane that is approaching the space station carrying one of our main characters, Dr. Haywood Floyd, who has basically been dispatched to the space station from Earth, and then we'll be taking a trip from there to the moon to address some type of mysterious occurrence that has happened there. And we see him sort of go through his flight, his check-in. There's a lot of really great effects showing zero gravity in the plane that he's in, watching the airline stewards attend to him, grabbing his pen that has floated off into zero gravity, dispensing food or drinks. It's really cool to watch. And while some might be less than impressed by this, I think it's a beautiful standard of practical effects that we're getting. Kubrick, who was a genius. This is a man who did complex mathematics as a hobby in his spare time. I believe was a grandmaster level chess player, and was also a really accomplished photographer before he became a filmmaker. Those skills that he had from photography are clearly on display in 2001, not to mention all of his films, but particularly 2001. I believe he even constructed new cameras and had new lenses created specifically for, either he had new lenses created, I think he might have even borrowed lenses from NASA to get certain shots and effects. His shots of outer space and the horizons, we're seeing, you sort of come over the top of the moon, and then you see Earth, and then you see the sun sort of peeking out over the top of the Earth. It looks so real. And you think, oh, this must be a digital effect. And all of it is practical use of models and images and light, photography. Again, it's just a real accomplishment. And the same goes for, stuff like Haywood Floyd's, flight to the space station. A lot of what goes on in that sequence, from the point that we are sort of introduced to Haywood Floyd, we see him going to the space station discussing with, he sees friends that I believe are supposed to be Soviets, which of course would be Russians, because they speak, I believe, are speaking Russian. Meet him and greet him. Of course, they're off doing their own research and pioneering their own technological projects and progress. And it's a really cool, interesting, positive view of the future of us getting along throughout the world and having made friends with, people that, were our adversaries at one time. And it's just beautiful to watch, even these scenes where these people are just having conversation, which is essential to the plot. You kind of are just looking around and looking at the chairs and how the chairs are styled and modeled. And you can see sort of the curvature of the floor because they're clearly on a space station. So the floors would be curved because the gravity within those space stations is basically built off of some sort of centrifugal force that holds everything in place. So much thought that went into this film that it really is a feast for the eyes, a feast for the mind. You see him, calling his daughter on her birthday. Of course, he's away. And, then we eventually get to what is sort of a secret meeting that he has with officials that are there on the moon about what's going on, and sort of the mystery sort of deepens. We eventually get to the moon, where we discover yet again another obelisk, just like the one that appeared at the dawn of man. And that won't be the last one that we see. I won't say too much more, other than we, from there, are introduced to Dr. David Bowman and his crew that are sent to investigate things, I believe, that are going on Jupiter, if I'm recalling correctly. I've only seen this movie 20 times. I should know by now. And the character of HAL 9000, which is a super intelligent computer, what we would consider today AI, which I remember watching this movie again as a kid and being tickled by the fact that we see the history of HAL of having been brought online in the year 1997 at the University of Urbana-Champaign in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois. which again, as an Illinoisan, is cool to see. I remember everybody growing up always thought that was a cool little touch. And from there, it's really about Bowman and his crew interacting with Hal, and us as viewers trying to discover, what exactly are they working at? What are they working for? What is the secret of these obelisks? And I won't move. I don't want to move my talk too much more from there, other than the fact that, as I said before, this is a movie about human evolution, and the idea that perhaps maybe human evolution on Earth may be guided by someone or something. I remember grasping that concept the first time I watched this movie, and I've always been sort of surprised by people who go in uh, completely blind and don't grasp that. I don't think this is a terribly. It's high concept science fiction. I don't think it's too terribly complex. There are a few things that occur towards the end of the movie that might make you scratch your head. But I think if you just sort of, this is one of those movies where it does demand your attention, it does demand your intellect, but it's not Tenet by Christopher Nolan. It isn't um, anything sort of like that where you really have to be thinking hard about it. It does, again, it demands your attention. It does demand a certain level of intellect, or I would say maybe imagination, but it's fun. You can sit back and just enjoy the visuals, because it is a visual feast, this film. It really does sort of stretch the imagination of possibility of what human beings are now more than theoretically capable of. We could have done all of these things that occur in this movie already. And, I won't get on my high horse about why we haven't done that, government. But, all of these things are possible. And it's a fun, interesting, sort of high culture, in my view, high culture science fiction film. It is a mystery film. It's even an action thriller. Once you get to the point where you are with David Bowman and his crew and Hell 9000, it does get really interesting, intense at that point. And it's probably one of the most fun adventure thrillers that you can see. And again, such a layered variety of genre that appear in this film, again, due to the absolute brilliance of Stanley Kubrick. Kubrick at the time included a lot of, what was high tech, high tech brands and firms into the film. We see and hear IBM. We see brands like Pan Am. There's even, I believe, where he is staying when we see Haywood Floyd in the space station, and he's arrived and he needs to make a phone call. We see that where he's staying within the space station is a Hilton hotel, which still exists. I believe the restaurant is Howard Johnson, which no longer exists. So it's kind of cool to see those things, what they thought would weather the next 50 years, well into the quote unquote space age. The actors are, of course, top notch. Everything feels so real, even when it becomes surreal. Again, I won't spoil too much for you. It's still just, it's the type of movie that feels so dreamlike. And it is a very sort of macro perspective of humanity from beginning to end, while about halfway through, we do get sort of the micro and the personal with Dr. Haywood Floyd, with Dr. David Bowman, and all of this. So it's some of the criticism has been like one of my favorite directors ever, a man who I regard as maybe the greatest director to have lived so far, Andrei Tarkovsky, considered the 2001 to be a little cold. He actually had a film called Solaris, which is also one of my other all-time favorite films, which was sort of his response to what he considered the coldness of Kubrick's 2001 to a more human, existential science fiction film. Again, Solaris, based on the book by the great Polish sci-fi writer Stanislaw Lem. I think you guys should watch both of those. Both are very long films. I believe 2001 is about 2 hours, maybe 2 hours, two and a half hours, I think at least. Uh, it bores some people, has never bored me. It's one of those films that when the world seems to be too much, when I really need to unplug and escape with some truly high art, some great cinema, 2001: A Space Odyssey always delivers. It asks really big questions. I don't necessarily see it as cold. It does kind of take a bit of a God's eye view of humanity, and at the same time, one point, like I said, does give us the sort of human view and becomes sort of an adventure thriller. And again, it asks really interesting questions about where did life on Earth, uh, how did life on Earth grow and evolve the way it did? Uh, what is the point of all of this? Why do we keep progressing and building and growing and keep reaching and striving? It's just a fun, interesting, really satisfying, substantive film. And even if you don't like to get as heady about this stuff as I do, take a chance and watch it. It's a really fun film. Even some of the more nerve-wracking parts of the narrative, to me, aren't. Um, I think we do, we're due, and I find myself escaping more and more to film that doesn't necessarily make me anxious. I like films, and Kubrick is a master of this. He makes films that it's not jump cut, jump cut, jump cut, jump cut, jump cut. It's too many jump cuts. It's what we do today, and stepping back into these older masterpieces of film shows you that you don't always have to do that. And in some ways, and in many ways, it becomes a more interesting visual viewer experience when you can watch a film by someone who just knows how to frame a shot and create a beautiful composition that you can just sort of sit there and just take it in. I think that great cinema, like all great art, should feed your soul in that way. And 2001: A Space Odyssey, for me, really delivers. Just the tech behind it, the genius and hard work of building these sets of using these lenses, again meant for NASA, specifically for shooting and to create these effects. It really works. Um, Anyone who is interested in film, anyone who wants something new to watch, Stanley Kubrick is someone that you should watch from beginning to end. I like most of his films, not all of his films. I 2001, Barry Lyndon, um, Eyes Wide Shut. He's just a very interesting, thoughtful guy, and he was sort of mysterious. He kind of hid away from the world. But even if you're not into his stuff, most people I have shown 2001: A Space Odyssey to have been pleasantly surprised that they enjoyed it as much. Literally, I think the first 3 minutes of the movie is a black screen, and um, you hear basically classical music that again appears later on in the film, and you think, what's going on here? But just sit back, allow yourself to experience something new, and I really think you'll enjoy it. But yeah, 2001: A Space Odyssey, probably in my top 3 to 5 of all time. It's really that good. So check it out. And yeah, if you disagree, or if there's anything like this film that you think I should watch, there's 2001, there's Solaris by Andrei Tarkovsky. There's some great double bills you could do with this movie. And yeah, let me know if there's anything I've missed. Comment below. If you've hung on this long, please like, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.